Welcome back. My guest, Jeff Greene, the Palm Beach billionaire, running in the Democratic primary for governor, a crowded field. And we'll talk about one of the biggest and most expensive environmental issues in Florida, Lake Okeechobee, and the toxic algae concerns that are growing yet again. What prescription for change are dealing with that problem? We saw a heated, passionate meeting just the other night on the Treasure Coast, people saying stop the discharges. They're seeing a repeat of 2016. There's efforts to create the reservoir south of the lake, efforts to finish the dike around the lake. There's talk about injection wells, and yet people say the algae keeps on coming.
You know, look, I mean, the Army Corps did a great job when they had to clear out the center of Florida to make it one of the most robust agricultural states in the country. But I mean, I think with this population growth and the discharges, we're getting a lot of unpleasant surprises now, and I think we have some work to do. I think that the Everglades restoration, which the voters passed and the governor did not fund, I will fund when I become governor. That will solve a lot of the problems of Lake Okeechobee.
Will you negotiate with interest both north of the lake, where many argue more water needs to be stored, and will you negotiate with interest south of the lake, agriculture, sugar interest, for more land than is currently prescribed in trying to send water south? What do you say to those interests?
Well, there was land already set to be bought. The funds were there. Rick Scott chose not to do it. I'm involved with the Everglades Foundation. I'm very aware of this issue. We're failing the people of Florida. I mean, we're not going to have drinking water in the state if we don't address this aggressively right now.
If you get pushback from agricultural interest around the lake, including south, and sugar interest, who say our livelihoods depend on the use of this land. There's already a push by environmentalists saying we need more land. What specifically will you say to those sugar and agricultural interests?
Well, Michael, I'm going to say what I say to every interest. You know, I'm not taking a penny from special interests when I run for governor. The only special interest I'm going to answer to is the people of Florida. So I'm not going to do anything to help special interest groups to help their businesses work at the expense of Florida's water supply. We're just not going to do it.
You have the luxury, the earned luxury, as you pointed out in your story and your upbringing, of spending your own money on your campaign. Is it going to be a completely self-financed campaign?
Well, you know, look,
you spent about 20 million back in 2010 in your Senate bid. You got about 30% of the vote. So how much are you willing to spend this time? Some said you said 50 million, and if I'm nominated, I'll be a kingmaker, put money into other Democratic campaigns. Look, what's coming out of your pocketbook for this campaign?
I'll spend as little as I have to, but as much as I need to. I mean, the problem is, look, let's face it. People say this is a purple state, a swing state. It's not a purple or swing state. The last election, Charlie Crist spent 50 million. Rick Scott spent 120 million. He won by 1%. Imagine if each of them had spent the same amount of money. This would have been a Democratic victory by 5 to 10%. So, you know what? The problem we have is we have not had the funds in our party to get our message out with the way the Republicans have.
What is your promise and message before we move on to the residents of the Treasure Coast who are hurting yet again? This topic's only going to become larger in the debate about who's best qualified to be our next governor, as they're looking at an algae crisis, potentially a big toxic algae crisis growing this summer just ahead of the primary.
Well, look, we are going.
Why are you different than the other candidates for their needs and concerns?
Well, I think absolutely. I got to tell you something. If you look at Adam Putnam and Ron DeSantis, I mean, they've taken money from all these special interest groups, and they're going to be guided. When somebody writes you a check for $100,000 or $500,000, you know, you do what you have to. I was reading about Rick Scott right in the Palm Beach Post about how we're spending $375 million on prison health care. And there was one bidder who was a contributor to Rick Scott. There won't be any special interest influence on me. The scientists, the right thing, that's what they're get from me.
My colleague, Brian Crowley, a familiar face and a longtime Palm Beach Post political editor and reporter, said before he went to air, he said, you know, the one thing I always like to ask is, at the end of the day, as governor, will you do what you think is best or what the people of Florida think is best? It's a philosophical question. Brian puts it to people. How do you answer that question with the contentious issues in a purple state where many people don't see eye to eye on key issues, including things like guns and the like, about education, about spending?
Well, look, you are representing the people of Florida, but they're electing me to use my judgment and to do what's right for the people of Florida. So, of course, if the scientists show me that there's a solution for the water problems on Lake Okeechobee, but some special interests have convinced a lot of the voters it's not, I'm going to do what's right for the people of Florida. That's the only special interest I'm going to be answering to.
Brian and I also were talking, and he said, you know, one other question in this crowded field, fundamentally, what issue do you put forward? Others are talking about education. Others are talking about the lake. Others are talking about school safety and guns. So fundamentally, how do you tip the scales? What issue separates you from these other candidates in the Democratic field?
Well, again, first of all, on education, I mean, because
they're all
we started,
talking about that.
Anybody, you know what, people have great ideas, and I'm glad we've had great ideas for 20 years in the Democratic Party. The problem is no one has been able to win. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the great ideas that I have, and remember, I'm the oldest, the most experienced, I think I have the best education, the most success. I mean, I think I'm the best candidate by far, but separate from that, I'm willing to take my money, and I worked for every penny, I started with nothing, and I'm willing to invest that money and win this race for the Democrats. Not only this race, I'm going to put my money and my wherewithal behind down ticket races. We're going to have a Democratic Senate too. I've already met with 5 amazing Senate candidates, all of whom are in swing in races that I think are going to go Democrat, and we're going to have a Democratic Senate in 2018. I
want to ask you a few questions. This will come up in the campaign. One article notes, quote, that you struck a conciliatory tone with Donald Trump early in his presidential tenure. Still have a membership at Mar-a-Lago. You know him. How well do you know him? What are your thoughts now? And people say, wait a minute, he's a Mar-a-Lago member. He knows Donald Trump. They run in the same billionaire real estate circles.
Well,
Is he more Republican than Democrat? What do you say?
Okay,
First, about your acquaintanceship with him.
Well, I've never had lunch or dinner with Donald Trump, so I'm not his friend. I think that I've stood up to him aggressively. The night before the election, anybody can Google this. I mean, I was on CNBC telling the whole world that I'd be scared to death to have Donald Trump as my president. When he was accused of attacking women, which he did during the summer of his campaign, I was in the Palm Beach Post quoted as saying, I think he's nothing but a sexual predator. And I can tell you that in his own club, and this is why I like going to his club, I've stood right up to him and let him know how I feel about what he's doing, ripping kids away from their parents and sticking them in cages. What I feel about Donald Trump is he is destroying our country.
You've said that to his face about ripping kids?
Well, no, I haven't seen him
since
then.
I wanted to clarify that. You said going to his club, and you would say it.
If I had a chance to, I would do that. And I can tell you that there's nothing, we have nothing alike. Look, he started a school that ripped off people, you know, a fake university. I started a school that provides education on a need-blind basis to residents of our community. So there's nothing we have in common whatsoever, and I'm looking forward to standing up to him aggressively as the governor of Florida.
As you make your pitch to Floridians in the run-up to the August primary, you've brought this up a number of times, your quote about Republicans have done an awful job the last 20, 25 years, but the fact of the matter is Republicans hold sway in Tallahassee, and voters, obviously over a generation, the preponderance of voters say they like what they're doing. That's a tough case to sell. They hold the governor's mansion, they hold the House, they hold the Senate. So how do you make your case, not only in a crowded field of Democrats, but to Floridians in general who, at least by their votes, have said we like what the Republicans are doing?
Michael, they don't like it, but they've been convinced they like that because the Tea Party, Sheldon Adelson, the billions, the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that have gone into these races have convinced them that look where we are. We're look, when I moved to Florida in 1970, my parents moved here. I didn't come with them. I stayed in Massachusetts to finish high school. You know why? I was told the schools weren't any good. Fast forward 48 years, we are number 40 in the country according to U.S. News Report and World Report. The Commonwealth study on health care. We are 47th in the country in health care provided to Floridians. That's their report card. That's what they can be proud of. Okay, they have destroyed our state. This is an emergency. We need to get rid of them and turn this state around. That's why I'm running for governor, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to turn Florida blue. We're going to finally fix education, health care, and once and for all get a raise to Florida families.
Jeff Greene, thank you for being our guest as you seek the Democratic gubernatorial nomination, and then should you succeed, on to November. It's a crowded field, and we appreciate you being with us.
Yeah, right here in West Palm Beach. I'm looking forward to being
Short drive for you today as you crisscross the state, and we'll be back with more in a moment.